Welcome to the Toll and Stone Q&A, where I answer your questions about the ancient Greeks and Romans. If you have a question about the classical world, ask it in the comments, and I'll address it as soon as I can. Today, we have 4 questions, all submitted by subscribers, and all very intriguing. We'll start with, what furniture would you find in a Roman insula? This is from Stephen Aslett. So, a Roman insula, if you're unfamiliar, is an apartment building. These range in quality from palatial to, downright unpleasant tenement stuff. The finest apartments were almost always on the first floor, that is, the floor just above the ground floor, which often housed shops. These apartments, these good apartments, we have some examples in Ostia, might have 7 or 8 rooms, reception areas, fine windows facing the street and the courtyard, and be in essence a compressed version of a Roman villa. But as you went higher in an insula, the apartments became smaller, cheaper, and generally more squalid. And so you came to the roof, finally, where there were jerry-built tenements, which were little more than lean-tos, shacks, inhabited often by seasonal workers. The amount of furniture you had in your apartment, therefore, varied with the apartment you had, how good it was, how big it was, how expensive it was. In one of these fine villa-style apartments on a first floor, you could have everything you'd have in a standard Roman domus, that is, a traditional freestanding house. Now, the Romans often had less furniture than you might expect. The Western aesthetic of filling the room really wasn't their deal. So you'd have, in bedrooms, for example, couches, but these were often simple, not like a grand California king bed or anything. In a dining room, you've had dining couches. Might be elaborate, they might have ivory legs or gilt on them, but the furniture itself is pretty minimalist. We know of, or often we find, marble table legs, which are elaborate in the shape of, say, lions or satyrs, which supported small freestanding tables. These are kind of the main ornamental pieces. We hear also about very elaborate and very expensive African citrus wood sideboards, often for the dining room we'd expect. Besides this, we know about elaborate stand lamps. We have a few of these from Pompeii, shaped sometimes like a boy holding like a pan with oil lamps in his hands. There might be cabinets for storing everything from dishes to the lares, the household gods. Or even iron safes. We have examples from Pompeii and know of others from Roman texts. There might also be a few braziers for warmth, charcoal burners. As your apartment became smaller and cheaper, of course, you have less room for furniture. And so at one of those top-floor tenement-style apartments, you might just have a few straw mats on the floor for sleeping on, and maybe a poor brazier or lamp or two to keep a bit of light and warmth in your place. So the short answer is less furniture than you probably would expect, but it depended on how nice your apartment was. Our next question, from Claudius Julianus, is, why did Roman elites give so much of their money to their cities? It's a good question. If you look at almost any of the famous archaeological sites in the Roman provinces, say Ephesus, for example, most of what you're seeing along the main streets are display buildings, public amenities ranging from fountains to, the place where the city councilors met, to Nymphaea, you name it. And almost all of this is endowed, at least in part, by local benefactors, rich men who have given, apparently at their own volition, huge amounts of money to build these marble monstrosities. Now, we call this custom the habit of building or of giving large sums of one's money to one's native place in the Roman world, euergetism. This is a modern term, they didn't call it this, but nicely captures the give and take of this whole process, which is, the rich man gives a city, a building, or some other benefaction, and in return receives honors from his city. This might have a physical manifestation, like an honorific statue, often of bronze or marble, life-size, and a nice tall plinth, which outlines all of the honors showered upon him by his grateful fellow citizens. But the real payout for these wealthy men was intangible. It was the honor and respect they received from their fellow citizens, the acclamations in the theaters, the nods from passers-by in the street. In short, the whole shape of ancient cities, with their lines of endowed buildings, reflects a society in which honor and reputation were the most important currency, social capital, if you will, mattering much more than just what's in one's ledgers. There's also theories that this was an important social outlet, that if Richmond did not give money to their cities, and didn't show they were being generous to their poor fellow citizens, they might incur the wrath of those citizens. They might be overthrown in social revolution. And so this was a way of ensuring that the people on top were sharing some of the wealth. Next question. How much do we know about Greek and Roman humor? This is from the Wiser Tomorrow podcast. We know quite a bit, though of course our evidence is scattered, as so often in ancient history. Most prominently, of course, we have works of ancient comedy from the stage. On the Greek side, above all, Aristophanes. Many famous comedies, say The Wasps, satirizing Athenian politics and the rise of Cleon, The Clouds, satirizing Socrates and his other intellectuals, the sophists. Others that are, if staged correctly, still pretty funny today. On the Latin side, we have the Latin comedians, Terence and Plautus, two of our earliest Latin authors. And Plautus in particular, I think, is still pretty engaging, or can be. A lot of wordplay, which reads better in Latin than English, but still comes off fairly well. This is, for the most part, not terribly highbrow stuff, a lot of slapstick, situational comedy, but, so are sitcoms. Then we have satire. Satire isn't always funny or meant to be funny. Juvenal, for example, the Latin satirist Juvenal, is pretty bitter, not a lot of fun to read. But others are funny. Lucian, who wrote in Greek and in the 2nd century AD, has some pretty entertaining works, satirizing all kinds of pretension, and is worth an easy go. Easy Greek, too, if you do read that language. We also have, on the Latin side, there are famous episodes from Petronius, the Satyricon, which, again, whether that's meant to be humor or meant to poke fun at the, satire, whether it's humorous or how humorous it is a matter of one's taste. But Juvenal can be pretty funny, too. Or sorry, not Juvenal. Our friend Petronius can be pretty funny, too. Other works, less well known. There's a satirical life of Aesop, the fabulist. Again, hasn't aged terribly well. Aesop was a slave and was abused, but he posts tricks on his master. Interesting stuff. There's a joke book, the Philogelos, Lover of Laughter. Most of those jokes are, again, haven't aged terribly well. I don't know how funny they were initially, frankly. But some will scare up a ghost of a chuckle, at least. One of my favorites is an incompetent schoolmaster is asked who the mother of Priam was. And he says, not knowing the answer, well, it's polite to call her ma'am. So that's what you're getting. New Yorker humor, I guess. But of course, in general, we have a vast variety here. Much of it's not terribly refined humor. It's stuff we've read here on the street. We have humorous graffiti, for example, places like Pompeii. Or my favorite in Ostia, in the Baths of the Seven Sages. We have these wonderful images of the Greek Seven Sages, so on and company. Captioned with toilet humor, pretty much. So I think, for example, Chilon, who's one of the seven sages, teaches how to fart stealthily. Final question. Did the Romans have nude beaches? This is from Gil Vider. Yes and no. So the Greeks, as you may know, were naked quite often. They exercised in the nude. Gymnasium means naked place. Competed in the Olympics, for example, in the nude. And if you're a Greek man, you're naked a fair amount of your time in public. It's just kind of a thing they do. Everyone thinks it's weird, the Romans very much included, but it's just sort of a Greek custom. The Romans, by contrast, are not naked very often in public. In fact, they regard, as I just mentioned, the Greek customs of being nude while competing in athletics quite scandalous. When Domitian tries to import Greek gangs into Rome, all these Greek dudes exercising and competing in the nude really throws Rome for a loop. The Romans are naked, however, in one place in public, and that is the baths. Now, there's there is mixed bathing, bathing for both men and women in some places and in some periods. But generally, men and women bathe in separate establishments or at separate times. And so it's less scandalous to Roman sensibilities for that reason. But most Romans, men or women, when they do go to the baths, at least bathe, if not exercise, naked. Now, this isn't always the case. Romans wear swimsuits sometimes. We have scattered textual references to this, a few mosaics that may show women in like bikini-style outfits. We know also that one emperor, Alexander Severus, used to show up in the baths in this rather elaborate bathing costume. It must have something to see. But for most Romans, it appears, judged from mosaics and from our texts, they're naked in the baths. And it seems, too, that when they go to a natural water hole, a lake, a river, they bathe naked, too. We have, for example, a passage in one of Cicero's orations in which he accuses an opponent, a woman, of building a villa by the Tiber in a place where men bathed regularly because she wanted to see them naked, a nice way to sling mud at an opponent. And it's almost certain that when Romans went to the sea, went to the beach, they were also naked. The most notorious seaside resorts in the Roman world were by the Bay of Naples, Baiae above all, where it appears that skinny dipping was something you did pretty routinely if you were in the smart set over there. The Romans went to the beach all the time. They really liked it. We hear about sandcastles, for example, in a few straight passages in Roman poems. And there is no reason to think that at the beach, when they weren't building those sandcastles or hanging out with other rich Romans, they were almost certainly naked. So in that sense, there almost certainly were lots of nude beaches in the Roman world. In fact, there were probably no non-nude beaches. And so I hope that answers your question, Gil. And that is a wrap for today. I hope you enjoyed our answers. And again, if you have a question of your own, ask it in the comments, and I'll address it as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.